there's somebody. Okay, so welcome everybody. We're so happy to see you. I'm Gretchen Hockmeister, the Executive Director of the Hotchkiss Library of Sharon, and we're all thrilled to see so many of you here tonight. This is the fifth in our ongoing virtual book signing series, and tonight's a really special one. For those, some of you are from far away, but for those of you from the northwest corner of Connecticut, you may not have remembered or realized, but tonight, at this very moment, was when our actual book signing, our 24th annual book signing, would have been taking place. We would be outside under the tents on the green right now with our cocktails, meeting all kinds of authors, all different subjects. Then there would have been author dinners afterwards, and it's our major fundraiser of the year, which is very important to us. So it's a bittersweet evening, I have to say, but there's a silver lining to all of this. These virtual events have been wonderful, and they've really given us more of an opportunity to speak with the authors and to talk more in depth. At the book signing, it's so quick. So this has been a wonderful alternative. So I'm sure tonight will be no exception. So I have a little bit of iced tea left in my glass, and I'm just going to ask you if you have wine or a glass of water to join me and raise a glass to the library and all libraries tonight. So thank you.
Cheers.
Wow.
I think most of you know how Zoom works by now for these events. Your mics are muted, but we do enjoy seeing you. So if you're comfortable, please leave your camera on. I suggest using speaker view. It's fun to see everybody now, but once we start the presentation, if you click the speaker view in the upper right-hand corner, then you'll just see Amity when she's reading and speaking. She's going to do a reading with us with a special guest this evening. I'll let her introduce the guest. And after that, I'm going to ask a few questions that I have in mind, and then we'll invite all of you to ask your questions, whether you've read the book or haven't read the book yet. You may do that either through the chat function on Zoom, and then we'll read your questions for you. Or if you'd like to speak directly with Amity, you can raise your hand in the participants box, and then we'll call on you, unmute you, and you can speak, or you can wave in the window and we'll call on you so you can speak with her. So without further ado, I will introduce Amity. She is the author of 4 novels and is the winner of a Fulbright Fellowship and fellowships at the MacDowell and Yaddo colonies. In 2016, she was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship for fiction. She teaches creative writing at Yale and lives in West Hartford, Connecticut, not too far away. Her short stories, essays, and book reviews have appeared in publications such as the New York Times, The Guardian, Die Welt, Harper's Bazaar, the Yale Review, Slate.com, One Story, Plowshares, and elsewhere. Her latest, Sea Wife, a Novel, has received wonderful reviews. She's going to begin with the reading, as I said, and this will introduce Sea Wife to those of you who haven't read it. In our discussion, we will try not to spoil too much for those of you who haven't read it yet. So welcome, Amity. We are so thrilled to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this beautiful evening. It really is gorgeous outside. I'm surprised there's not more people sitting on their decks, but maybe you'll do that after this is over. I am thrilled to be here. I am a huge supporter of libraries. Your library is absolutely beautiful, and I feel like as a Connecticut author, very proud to be so close to you and to be associated with Connecticut, which features in the novel, actually. The family that I describe is from a town a little bit like West Hartford, a little bit like maybe a mashup of West Hartford and Farmington, I would say. So you might, if you read the book, will recognize some of the Connecticut landmarks in it. So I am going to start with a reading. And as I said this, yes, I do have a special guest. Let me see if I can get to, so I'm in gallery view right now, but I cannot see myself. I'm just tiny.
Oh, in the upper right corner, there's a little grid. Do you see a grid or a 4 little squares? Click on that and it should switch.
Yeah, it's not switching for me. I'm just like in a little tiny on the top.
But you see it, but when you should switch to the bottom when you're.
I don't. Yeah, I'm
Huh.
not.
It might be
Is there-
something in your settings.
Yeah, if you go to exit full screen,
Okay, exit full screen.
up in the corner too, there should be gallery view, and then next to it, exit full screen,
Okay.
and then
Uh,
speaker
no,
view. Does it change? It doesn't change?
no.
Huh. I wonder.
Okay, wait, let me, all right, well, I blew myself up. So I can see myself now. I'm gonna
You look very nice, even small. You look great.
I probably don't really need to see myself any bigger. That's totally erroneous. Let me introduce my special guest. He's someone I know very well because I'm married to him, and he is helping me in this period of improvisation instead of going out on the road as I would normally to help read from a book. I have only one kind of cast member that I can bring on to read with me. The reason I have to bring him on is for those of you who have read Sea Wife or have taken a look at it. There are two parts, and it's really a duet. The book is really a duet between Juliet and Michael, and Juliet's sort of on one side of the page and Michael's on the other side of the page in a slightly bolder font. And they braid together, the two narratives braid together so frequently that it's actually pretty hard to read it just as one person. It wouldn't make sense. So I am proud to be bringing along Tim Watt, my husband and my first reader and my best friend. And it's funny because there's a lot of marital strife in this novel, and fortunately, that's not autobiographical. Not
Oh, fiction. It's fiction.
It's fiction. Not that we don't have problems, but it's certainly not the ones in the novel. All right.
Everything's perfect.
So I'm going to click over here to where did we go, Tim? Oh, here we are. Okay. I'm going to be reading from the screen. So this is from the beginning of the novel, and it's just a thumbnail of the novel is really that it's about a family of 4 from Connecticut, and they decide spontaneously to buy a boat, which is in Panama. It's really the husband's idea. You'll hear about this in the reading. And Juliet, the mom, reluctantly agrees, but they agree in an effort to kind of reconnect with one another and also to give their kids an adventure, and also because Juliet's struggling with depression. So that's the thumbnail. Where does a mistake begin? Lately, I've found this simple question difficult, impossible actually. A mistake has roots in both time and space, a person's reasoning and her whereabouts. Somewhere in the intersection of those two dimensions is the precisely bounded mistake. In nautical terms, its coordinates. Did my mistake begin with the boat or my marriage itself? I don't think so. I now suspect that my mistake took root in an innocent experience I forgot to decipher, the mystery of which has quietly ruled me. For example, I remember standing beside a blindingly blue Howard Johnson's motel pool at 12 years old, watching a couple undress one another through a half-drawn curtain while my estranged father disputed the bill in the lobby. Should I have looked away? Did the miscalculation occur even earlier as I sat on a rope rug in clean kindergarten sunlight and I leaned toward the boy beside me and accepted his insistent whisper? I still feel his dew in my ear. And now I'm sitting in a closet, Michael's closet. I should explain. Several days ago, I came in here looking for something of his and discovered that the carpet is very plush. The slatted bifold doors filter the sunlight beautifully. I feel calm in here. Hiding in closets is the habit of children, I know. I used to hide in my mother's closet when I was a kid. Her closet contained some dressy silks and wools she never wore. I loved holding these fabrics against my body or stepping into her high heels as if onto a dais, rehearsing my future. I never felt ashamed. Surely there is some connection between seeking refuge in my mother's closet long ago and hiding in Michael's now, but that insight does not help me. Sometimes life just writes you tiny, awful poems. To be honest, I'm uncertain whether or not I can survive this day. I mean, if I want to. To go outside requires preparation and composure. If I were to go out to start walking around and seeing people again and going to the grocery store and getting on with it, invariably what someone would ask me is, do you regret the journey? Was the journey your mistake? But I do not regret saying yes to the boat. Saying yes to the boat was my clearest act of loyalty toward my husband. I can't afford to regret it. If I did, I would only be left with my many disloyalties.
January 17, 10:15 a.m., log of yacht Juliet, from Porvenir towards Cayos Limones. 9 degrees, 33.5 minutes north, 78 degrees, 56.98 minutes west. Northwest wind, 10 knots, seas 2 to 4 feet. Notes and remarks. We are 102 miles east-northeast of Panama City, catching prevailing winds into the sovereign territory of San Blas. The shape of the coast is still visible behind us, but ahead is just water. Nothing but water. That's when I realized there's only one ocean. One big mother ocean. Yes, there are bays and seas and straits, but those are just words, artificial divisions. Once you're out here, you see there's just one unbroken country of water. You'd never feel this way on land, not in our country. What a feeling. Generations of sailors have failed to describe it. So what are my chances? Me, Michael Partlow. Michael Partlow, who can't tell you the title of a single poem. Just ask my wife. Her head is full of them.
When I first met him, I thought I'd never marry a guy like that. Too persnickety, too conventional. No sense of humor. But I was wrong. Marriage and kids and the grind made Michael morbidly funny. He got funnier and funnier, while I, who had been funny, got less funny. There was this ratty muscle shirt to which he was superstitiously attached when we were living aboard the boat. The memory of this shirt makes me laugh out loud. While sailing in hot climates, you start wearing as little as possible. And cruising kids, they dress like lunatics, wearing grass skirts under flamenco dresses with muck boots and shell necklaces, mementos of places they've been. I have no idea where Michael got the muscle shirt. Panama City? Standing ashore, beaming with his boyish face and unwashed hair, he looked like a prep school kid who'd gotten lost on a hike 20 years ago.
The crew of our vessel is fit and in good spirits. Names and titles are the following. Boatswain Sybil Partlow, age 7. Deckhand George Doodle Partlow, almost 3. First mate Juliet Partlow, and me, the captain. The deckhand is doing his best to stand upright in small swell. He's pantless, begging first mate to let him whiz off the side of the boat. His growing vocabulary is strictly maritime. Fish go, boat go. A very large sea turtle just surfaced portside, head like a periscope. Sybil says it's a spy. Whenever Sybil says anything cute, she tells me to write it down. That turtle's a spy. Write that down in your book, Daddy. Pardon me, I say. Are you speaking to me? What do you call me underway, bosun? She laughs. Okay, write that down in your book, Captain.
The muscle shirt was so funny because he's normally such a neatnik, a dandy, and a rearranger. He needs almost no sleep. His mother said he'd always been that way. Here at the house, he used to work late into the night, sending emails and finishing reports, but mostly man-tinkering, learning about electrical wiring by getting another appliance or making little toys for the kids. In the morning, he'd leave for work as shiny as an apple. He wouldn't let the children eat in his commuting car. Goldfish, Triscuits, verboten. But the family car, my car, lawless. A layer of organic material composted under the seats. I understand it now, sitting here. I understand how nice it must have been for him to have a little fiefdom, a closet, where shoes are paired and the world is shut out and you get to make all your own choices. My closet, just there on the other side of our bedroom, is haphazard. I gave up trying to neaten it when Sybil was a toddler. After months of hanging them up, I just left all the blouses on the floor where she'd pulled them off the hangers. She'd shuffle out of the closet in my shoes, unsteady as a drunk, and leave them under tables and sofas. But I'm a mother. Gradually, I just gave them all away, all my spaces, one by one, down to the very last closet.
You learn a lot about people when you tell them you're going to sea with your kids. About 10% of them will say, "Hey, that's amazing, Godspeed." And the other 90% won't hesitate before telling you why it's impossible. Then they want you to spend a couple hours walking them back, explaining how you are going to get food, or take a shower, or keep up with the news. Everyone was worried about the kids. "How could you do this with kids?" they asked. "Aren't you worried about their safety? What if they fall overboard? What if they miss home? Why not wait until they're 18? Why not wait until you're retired?" But isn't there something wrong with the line of thought that it's reasonable to defer your modest dream for several decades? What are we, characters in a Greek myth, waiting for the eagle who comes to eat our liver every day because in a Greek myth, that's normal?
Let me begin by saying that buying a boat was the most absurd idea I had ever heard. I'd never boarded anything but a ferry in my life, and Michael hadn't sailed since he was in college. "You've got to be kidding me," I said to him. "You want me and our two little kids to live on a boat with you in the middle of the sea?" "Just for a year," he said. Of course I said no. My first reaction was shock. I thought he'd lost his mind. Me and the kids living on a boat? He might as well have said, "Let's live upside down and walk on the ceiling." But I wasn't only talking about the implausible plan to walk away from our house and the kids' schools and Michael's job. I was asking whether we were to go or to stay, what would we do about us? "You think this will solve all our problems. It's magical thinking, Michael. It's the way a child thinks."
We talked a lot about practicalities, but the usual subject was off limits. So, like many a brave husband before me, I dropped hints. "Did she know," I ventured to ask, "that the ancient Romans believed that sea voyages could cure depression?" Juliet would only glare at me. One night in bed, biting the bullet, I just decided to be honest. "Juliet," I said, "look, you're stuck. It's been years since I've seen you happy. You want to stay here in Connecticut and be depressed and not finish your dissertation? That's your end game? Maybe this would be good for you." "I'm not depressed," she said. "Besides, I hate that word." "Okay, what should we call it?" She fluffed the pillow behind her back indignantly. She said, "I'm very faithful to my problems."
I do know a lot of poems from all those hours in my carrel at Boston College trying to write my dissertation before we moved out to the land of steady habits. Ironically, one reason I gave up on studying poetry is because it seemed brutally impractical compared to the urgencies of raising two children. But these days, inside my closet, poetry is as real to me as an axe. I need it more than food. Lines come and go in my mind. I don't even remember who wrote them. Battles are lost in the same spirit in which they are won. I eat very little, mostly just dinner with the kids, and I lap from the bathroom tap when I'm thirsty. During the day when I have to leave the closet, I push open the doors and cross the carpeted bedroom in my socks. The body creaks, the bladder longs. I avoid the bathroom mirror. When I return to our bedroom, sometimes I linger by the front windows where birds mob our blighted apple tree, not realizing they can be nakedly seen through the leafless branches. I spy on them, just as the occasional curious neighbor spies on me. Our plain white house is now a point of interest. It's been on the news. I see the way people walking past our house slow down and how, if in pairs in the evening, they exchange a somber look. Vivas to those who have failed, and to those whose war vessels sank in the sea, and to those themselves who sank in the sea. It's true, history is written by the victors. That's why we need poets to sing of the defeats. I think you're out of the frame. You're out of the frame.
No.
So much. Thank you,
I
Tim.
hope he was in the frame. I was like, not sure. Maybe I pushed him out there.
Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that means a lot to me. He was the person who helped me write this book when I lost my way several times.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. I hope that you've all been well during the pandemic, and I think that certainly puts the novel in a different perspective now that we've all, in a sense, been stuck at home at sea with our loved ones. I enjoyed the book so much, I think, because I felt that it demanded so much of me as a reader, and I loved that. There's so much going on so many levels. It's about so many things. It's an adventure, survival story, the story of trying to write a failing marriage. It deals with depression and motherhood, contemporary politics, childhood trauma, mother-daughter relationships, feminist poetics, tragedy, love, forgiveness. It's amazing to me. I just marvel that you could get all of that in there. And
everything but the kitchen sink.
There you go. No room on the boat for a big kitchen sink, right?
No.
Just a tiny one. So, and also I certainly wanted to acknowledge there was such incredible, beautiful writing in the book that was also a joy to read. So
Thank you. Thank you so much.
could you tell us a little bit about the real life incident that inspired you to write the novel?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that I was thinking about writing a book set at sea even before I heard this news story. But I will tell you the news story was extremely important to me going ahead with the idea. It was about a family of also of four, two very little kids who were in the middle of the South Pacific when they needed a rescue by the Coast Guard. It was a story that was on the news, and largely because they were fine. Actually, everybody survived, and the problem came when they came back to shore. And I remember the criticism that they got for taking their kids on a boat. And you know, it seems to people who don't do this that this is an incredibly difficult. I mean, Michael talks about it in this excerpt. You know, most people will be like, what are you doing? You have to explain this to me. So I understand that it's hard for us landlubbers to know this, but there are actually quite a number of people who do live on boats and for various reasons, and do raise children on boats. So I got to know a lot about that kind of lifestyle as I was writing this book. But when I read that story in the newspaper, I think I had wanted to set a book at sea. Why is still a mystery to me, but I think that I really wanted to describe the beauty of the sea. I like to describe things. You can see my writing's descriptive, and it's a challenge, but of course there's nothing more beautiful and changing and romantic than the ocean. So I think I started there, and then this story really hit home. And why? I mean, I have two children. Often think about what things, you know, often feel like we're in our little box in our kind of conventional Connecticut lives, and what's it like if you made a different choice, and what would happen. I think a lot of novelists, that's kind of how they start a novel, is like, what if, you know, and you explore paths that you wouldn't take per se, personally. You explore them in your writing and in your imagination.
What kind of experience did you have with sailing when you started the project? Did you sail before, and what kind of research did you do?
I have almost no experience sailing. I did go on a trip when I was a kid with my parents, who were wonderful adventurers. So we did have adventures when I was a kid, but we spent a month with our friends who did own a boat in the Caribbean. And I think that must have made a huge impression, because as you can see, I mean, the Caribbean blue, it's a gorgeous book, you know, of the cover. I guess it was sort of remained in my mind, that adventure. Other than that, I mean, I was, I think, 8 or 9, so I had nothing to do with sailing. Then once I decided to write this book, I obviously had to learn a lot, and it was quite a bit to chew off there. because a lot of times they say, write what you know. Well, I know about a lot of the themes and issues in this book, but I know nothing about sailing. And so I think that sort of edict didn't work for me. I wanted to have to learn about sailing. Of course, it was a struggle. So, and there's a couple challenges of learning about sailing, and one is the language. There's a great deal of nautical terminology that I had to read. And then also there's so many parts on a boat, and the act of sailing doesn't come intuitively to me. I really didn't understand it naturally. So I had to learn the terminology, but I also had to learn, finally, I did have to go and learn how it feels to be on a boat. And I did that by going on a research trip in December of 2016 by myself to the Caribbean nation of Grenada, where I was in a sailing course for 10 days. So that's kind of how it was the combination of book learning and taking that course and doing a great deal of research by talking to sailing families. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, people might not know how much research novelists really do. Again, unless you're going to write, domestic dramas that are set in exactly where you live with exactly your people, every novelist really does have to learn things in order to make that novel persuasive and incredible. We all know how easily the reader becomes skeptical if the writer has not fully researched her topic. Because even if you don't know much about sailing, I start using the wrong term, and then you just kind of wake up and don't feel like you're really immersed in the book anymore. And you don't want your readers to wake up. It's a beautiful dream. We enter voluntarily, consensually. We enter this dream of a novel, and we want to stay there until it's over.
Right. Did you set out to write the book as a dialogue from the beginning, or did that come through your process somehow? Did you realize that would be the best way to structure it?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was quite important to me that these two voices, they really were very formative for the book. I started to, so most books are written, of course, quite in big chunks, and maybe with one narrator or maybe two, but not interspersed in a sort of play-like fashion. And I wanted to really experiment with that. Something that influenced me a lot was a poem by Robert Frost, Home Burial. And it's about a couple who have lost a child, and they're discussing it from their different angles. They're both very sympathetic. And the poem, though it's a poem, also borrows from the play genre because they're talking back and forth with one another. And I thought, like, how could the novel genre borrow from the genre of drama? Because I love plays and I love the energy of the back and forth. And I just have gotten impatient writing those long scenes that are often the kind of cornerstone of a novel, these long expositional scenes. I just don't know why. I've just been moving further and further away from that. So it's as if the novel is, a duet, and Juliet speaks and Michael speaks, and they the energy of the novel often comes from that back and forth. Mm-hmm. And you put it together, the reader puts it together. And I like how you said, Gretchen, that the book made a certain demand on you as a reader to kind of interpret it. And I like that. When I read books, that's what I want. I don't want to close a book and be like, great, understood it, then, checked that box. Like, I like, as a teacher of mine said once, like a book should cast a shadow. It should sort of cast a shadow after it. And I think that I was trying to write such a book that, whereas the narrative is quite complete. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is an adventure story. Mm-hmm. But then there's these other things that kind of, I would hope, cast a shadow, make the reader think, maybe the reader want to read parts of it again. Mm-hmm. It's a long answer to your question.
When did you come up with the fabulous opening line? Where does a mistake begin? With that?
Oh man, that is, I have not gotten that question before, and I have no idea.
Yeah, you didn't just sit down and write that first, though.
I think that, you know, what I did with this book was I opened up a document. I think I have a couple students from, you know, here and there, here tonight. And I teach a novel writing workshop, and some of them might have shown up, but I teach that independently. And I opened up a document, and I think I just started to throw lines in there, stuff that was interesting. So some of the first, it wasn't written chronologically the way you receive it here. I opened and I let Juliet speak, and then I let Michael speak. And then I would just write what was interesting to me. So again, I didn't try to knit it all together. I didn't try to write long expositional scenes. I just was like, splash this here, splash that there. And then of course, as I was writing the draft, I then had to supply some connective tissue to those things, and definitely had to do some backstory. There were scenes late in the book when I realized I hadn't quite fully imagined Juliet and Michael's early years together. And because there's some debate, which I love, about whether or not their marriage is, you know, terrible and dysfunctional, or a good marriage that's just under stress. And the jury's out for me on that one too, but I wanted to explore their early life. And I did, by writing that backstory, eventually after a draft was done, I did get to know what had connected them when they first met in college, you know, long ago.
Great. I have one more question before we turn it over to our guests. And this is not directly about the book, but I'm sure that you know Lauren Groff, the wonderful writer. And I noticed today that it's her quote that's on the front jacket here, which I hadn't noticed until this afternoon. But a few weeks ago, she was interviewed by the Harvard Gazette, and she was asked how she balanced writing and motherhood. And she had a fabulous reply, and it's been all over the Twitterverse now. But I quote, she said, "I understand that this is a question of vital importance to many people, particularly to other mothers who are artists trying to get their work done, and know that I feel for everyone in the struggle," she answered. "But until I see a male writer ask this question, I'm going to respectfully decline to answer it." So I'm going to cheat a little here. I know you have 2 kids, and I'm not going to ask you the question. Instead, I'm going to ask you, how would Juliet answer the question? Given her transformation through the novel and her dissertation on Anne Sexton's poetry, which deals so much about motherhood and ambivalence and all that kind of stuff. What do you think Juliet would say about that?
Why do you ask about Juliet and not what Michael would say?
There you go. You got me.
I know, I love Lauren, and actually know that she feels that way. And in fact, when we had a joint discussion, she interviewed me at Politics and Prose, which is a wonderful Washington, D.C. bookstore, at which I'm interviewing another writer on Monday, if anyone's looking for an event to go to. I can write that in the chat at some point, but so I had said, "Oh, you can ask me anything. You can, I'm happy to talk about what it's like to be through the pandemic." And she's like, "I'm not going to. I don't think that women should be asked that when men are not asked that question." However, I don't quite have the same, you know, constriction around the question. I think that what Juliet, and so what would she say? What would Juliet say about what? About,
you know, how do you balance everything in your life?
Balance.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I'd say, so that is a really great question, because I think Juliet and I would have different answers. And so it's really interesting. But Juliet would say, you fail. I mean, you know, she's one of many women. It's quite common, and my friends, even myself at occasion, I think women throughout generations have been asked to give up their spaces. And it's what Juliet talks about at the beginning of the book. She just gives them away. It's like, wow, I can't preserve that. My toddler's coming in and tearing up my closet. Oh, my husband needs this. I'll give up that space. Oh, I don't have the concentration for this sort of intellectual project, I'll just give that up. And I think that Juliet is failing at the balance, and that's part of why she agrees, I think, to go on the journey, because she does feel like she doesn't have that much to lose. He's right to say when he says, you've been down for a long time, you haven't finished your dissertation, are you happy? And she's really not. So I think that one reason why she would say it's not a mistake to go on the boat, though, as you read the book later, it definitely, there's an element of tragedy that happens, not with the children, I want to say, just get it out there. But, she doesn't consider it a mistake because she needed this to almost to externalize her struggle. And something that's, I think, great about adventure, travel, extreme sports, whatever risks you want to take, is they externalize a sort of inner struggle that we all have, which is, in a lot of times, it's us against ourselves, and she is really fighting against herself. No one's forcing her to do anything, but she gives up rather easily these spaces. She needs to learn her own strength and learn her own importance. And I think that she does learn that on the boat, even though she's not an experienced sailor. And so the journey really is hers.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very empowering to see the transformation she goes through, and she doesn't want to her initial response to the question of going on the ship is, she doesn't want to admit it, but she says, I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of being an embarrassment. And we know that's the farthest thing from how she ends up.
Right.
So it's wonderful. Yeah. So let's see. I'm sure that our guests here have lots of questions. I see Tom waving his hand, so I'm going to unmute him. There you go, Tom. Oh, hang on. Sorry. It's not. There you go.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Amity, I just love the book, and I was interested to hear your explanation about how you became so seaworthy. And reading the book, I would have thought that you would have salt water in your veins. It was just a marvelous exposition of sailing, and as I thought you would have been a seasoned sailor. And I just want to say too that having read Sea Wife, I gobbled up Schroeder, and I'll ask you, keep writing, write fast, and let us out, because I just adore your writing. You're fabulous.
Oh, Tom, thank you so much. You just made my day. Thank you. I don't I don't get to meet many writers. I'm confined here, so that means a lot. It means an extra a lot right now. Thank you for saying that. You look like you're outside or in some sort of coastal area, but I can't see you very much.
Actually, I'm in Sharon, Connecticut. Where are you?
Oh, you're in Sharon. Okay. All right. Well, well, thank you for the compliment about the seawater in my veins. I really don't. Just regular blood, I would say that I felt it was rewarding for me because it was very difficult. And as I will say sometimes when I'm teaching, is sometimes something is even more rewarding when it's difficult. Of course you can fail at it, which I did at times really feel that I was not writing persuasively about sailing. And then I would go back at it and try again and learn more and talk to other people. And so the reward of being able to do that and it is more palpable. I feel like I journeyed the same way my characters did, because I had so much to learn, and because I started out like them as not a very seasoned sailor. I did have this help from families, and in the acknowledgments I do name some of them. There's one family in particular the Zartmans who took me out on their boat, and also just I spent time with them. So some of the little details, like for example, there's that moment where the girls that they meet in the anchorage are flying from the halyard.
Yeah.
They're swinging, yeah, and around the mast. And, you know, I got that from the Zartmans. They would say, I remember when I met the girls, I said, don't you ever get, you know, don't you ever want to run, you know, or run or go, right? It's like, we go up. And it turns out they climb the mast and they swing around the mast. So that kind of detail, I don't think I could have generated. You know, I really needed to have somebody who was generous enough, and there are lots of people actually who are very willing to tell you their stories, you know, generous enough to spend that time with me and to show me. So I needed those details like flying around the mast, and then I supplied a lot of the rest with my imagination and with my book learning. But I really did need those nuggets of true things given to me by other people. And novelists are great. We're like crows, you know, like the idea that a crow just takes a shiny thing from here or there, and you look in their nest and it's full of this stuff. I agree with that. But thanks again, Tom, and thanks for reading Schroeder. I feel like it's close to my heart, and please check out either of my books. I'm very grateful if you do that.
Can I ask what you're working on now?
Yeah, well, I mean, before the pandemic, I got the date. It's like March 13th. Everything kind of changed, and my kids, you know, we're not in school anymore. I had to interrupt the work, but I was working before then quite well for, I'd say, the most of the year on another book about like adventure. This one about a hiker who gets lost, a middle-aged woman. Yeah. And really enjoying, yeah. So I'll get back to that. We got to be. Oh, thank you.
Please do.
Thank you.
Back to work.
We have a question from Davida. She asked a question that we already discussed. If you started the book at what is now the beginning, and she wanted to know more about your process. And she said, "I loved this book for its depth and its lovely writing."
Thank you. I think it's Davida. I'm not, this is a woman I have met and heard wonderful things about. Thank you so much for your comment. Yeah, I do start each book in a different way. Tom mentioned Schroeder. It's, you know, that was, well, actually similarly based on a news article that I read and then ran with. And so that's kind of, you know, where I get ideas. The writing process is, I guess, a different question though. You're not asking kind of where I start so much as like what my daily life and writing is like. So I would say that the writing process for me is I definitely have to be alone. It has to be quiet. And this is part of the reason why I can't write now. I can't really do it. Some writers do it in an hour. I remember, you know, hearing, you know, Toni Morrison would wake up at 4 a.m. and write until she went to her job as an editor. I wish I could do that, but I need more time. So for me to have a stretch of time is really, really important, because I find that at the beginning of any writing session, my head is just really full of static. It takes a while to drop in there. And I think what a lot of writers would say is there's a state of mind that you really have to cultivate, and it's very hard to get to. It makes us sound like a bunch of snowflakes, but I think we are in a way, you know. It's like you have to get to this mind state, and then once you're in that mind state, you become generative, which isn't to say you're writing something great. You can still make a lot of wrong turns. But I know when I'm in that mind state, and I know when I'm not. And so it's really searching for that concentration, that space of concentration, where you can trust what you're writing is, you know. So I hope that answers the question. Sorry.
Can I weigh in again?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, you're interested. Did you ever read Trollope's autobiography? Anthony Trollope.
No.
I mean, he was as disciplined as they come. And he would wake up every morning at something like 5 o'clock, and he would write for like 3 hours, and he would set himself a goal of something like 5,000 words. And he said, I don't understand if the shoemaker doesn't wake up and say, I don't feel like making shoes. You know, it's he had this incredible discipline where he would just make himself do it. And it's I guess an animal that I don't understand, and I guess probably difficult.
Well, I mean, the truth is I've never really tried to write that way. It's possible that you know, this pandemic has really changed so much, and maybe it's time, you know, to, now that we're looking at the fall of still not getting the kids all the way in school, that I need to think about that. You know, maybe I can try to drop in there for shorter periods of time. Yeah. Because it's really, for those of us who write, it's really, it's not it almost feels like not discretionary. I mean, you really have to do it. I really miss it, and I want to get back to it.
We have a question from Nancy, and she asks, why did you decide that the children should be quite young, especially the son? And she wonders if they had been older, maybe 10 and 12, would it have significantly altered the adult dynamics?
Oh, interesting question, Nancy. Thank you. That is so true. I think having a 14-year-old, I have a 14-year-old and a 7-year-old. So I really do understand the big difference between those ages. I guess my really, simple answer is I have a 7-year-old, and she says the most amazing things. And I think I was just being totally pragmatic by being like, wow, I can use some of the cute things my daughter says and put them in the book, which is totally what I did for Schroeder when I had another 7-year-old child, and it was at that time my son who I was stealing from. So that is not a very glorious answer to that question. It really shows you, again, that crow scavenger aspect of the writer's life. I think both my kids know that I do poach their things and the things they say. In fact, once after Schroeder and my son had heard that I had stole some of his lines to give to the girl in that book, I remember once he said something mildly cute, and he looked at me and he was like, aren't you going to write that down? Say, uh-oh. Hazard of being the child of an author. He was sort of expecting that attribution. But so I made them young because that was where I was at. I think I really am interested in the teenager now that I'm having that experience. And they are so different and so interesting. And small, or people who, now my son is significantly taller than me, that still only has 14 years of life. So it's a very interesting mix of things. Absolutely would have changed the dynamic in the marriage, because the teen feels free to intervene, and to give their opinion about absolutely everything, and make those observations. And Juliet and Michael don't really have to deal with that. The kids are, a little out to lunch about what's going on, especially the little one who can really barely speak.
We have a question from Wendy, and she writes, so many writers are working through their demons in their writing as a catharsis. Is this in any way true for you?
Thanks for the question, Wendy. Yes. There was a question I got on like a questionnaire for the publisher, and it said, would you be lying if you said your work is not autobiographical? And I felt like they were tricking me into, yes, I would be. I think that all writers' work is autobiographical. And I mean, it's autobiographical in the sense that it has to be felt by the author in an intimate way in order for it to be rendered convincingly to the reader. I don't think you can fake a lot of things in your writing. Nothing really of consequence. I can fake, for example, some of the sailing stuff. I had to learn that, but some of the feelings in it, I think that you do need to experience. So yes, I agree that writers are working through their demons. the word demons, of course, makes it sound ghoulish and horrific. The truth is, I think the reason a lot of people do want to write, even as not as a profession, just as a diversion or as something to make their lives richer or better, it's because it's a wonderful way, actually, to process your life and to give form to your questions. I know that I feel like I understand things through writing about them. And so in a weird way, that is the catharsis. It's not that I have confessed, because some of the stuff in the book is me, and some of it is stuff that I have invented, and some of it is stuff I've stolen from other people. But the catharsis is that I've given shape to the questions, and I hope that those questions are universal enough ones that other people share them. So it's a kind of personal catharsis with the attempt to connect with somebody else, if that makes sense. You reach in to reach out.
We have a question from Karen. Did you know how the novel would end when you began, or did you write into it?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the question, Karen. I know how the novel would end. I don't know. I think that I changed my mind various times about how it would end. So I guess the answer is I didn't know. But I did know that, I mean, when you put a family on a boat, I mean, they're probably gonna run into some weather. Even when I was doing my mini sailing course, I ran into bad weather. You know that anyone who, there's problems and challenges on a boat, even if it's just breakdowns. There's so much inherently dramatic about putting a family on a boat and sailing them, especially when they take a longer passage across. They sail from, Panama to Jamaica. And so I knew that there would be drama, and I knew sea adventure is I think a valid way to describe it, that they would face things at sea. Of course, I didn't want it to be the predictable things. Like, I didn't want anyone to drown. I mean, that's what you would expect. So I had this I was going with a sense of their journey, of their kind of crucible, of their difficult journey, but I wasn't sure about the details of that. There was a moment where I was brainstorming with Ben and Danielle Zartman, actually in their house with them, and they kind of gave me a couple different ideas of how things could sort of go wrong for the family, and I ended up taking one of their ideas.
I think Holly has a question.
Sure. I mean, I have a question and just a comment. One of the things that really captivated me about the novel was how you expressed Juliet's initial sense of fear of sailing. She really wasn't comfortable with the physical motion, and I just have to say, I'm not much of a sailor, and I totally identified with that. I thought, part of me sort of wants to say, no, don't do it. Don't get on the boat. You just did a wonderfully compelling, it was just really a wonderful job of describing that in a way that seemed so believable, because it came right out of me. Mm. But my real question, referring to, you mentioned I think it's in a section at the end about Anne Sexton and naming her child Joy.
Oh, yeah.
And the relationship between the joy and the not joy in her life. And I wondered if you could make the same for Sybil. Sybil being a prophet, essentially, in the old days, who might be able to tell you what's ahead, or give you some of the, the work that a prophet would have done. I don't know, I'm just maybe making that all up, but I wondered if there was any of that.
Wow, that's a really interesting, wonderful question. So you're saying Sybil was sort of prophecy? What?
Yeah, kind of look, yeah.
I know I didn't think of that at all, but this is why it's great to talk to readers, because then they bring up stuff you didn't think of.
We always assume you've thought this all through.
Yeah, right. No, they do. And some of it, yes, but not all of it. There's so much that's still unknown to the writer. there's definitely ambivalence among readers. I will say this about the notes section in the book. And in fact, I'm going to give someone on Instagram reached out and was like, explain the ending. And I'm going to go on Instagram Live with her and try to parse that. I want to say that to me, the book ends with the last line of the when Sybil is. Well, I can't read it. Some of you haven't read it.
Before the note, you could say it ends before the notes.
It ends before the notes.
Yeah.
So the notes section it sort of brings up a lot of just themes that have been present in the book, but actually does not need to be read. I have really enjoyed writing Juliet's dissertation. I don't have a PhD, but I've always admired and wanted one. So I think I finally got to write a little dissertation there, and that's all my original explication of the poem. The original poem is really beautiful. Yeah, the double image is the best poem I've read about maternal, sadness or ambivalence or postpartum depression. Yeah.
Sure. Well, and I will say Sybil was a most amazing character. I mean, she was such a wise little thing at the same time that she was a little kid, and the connection that as with her father as it got deeper as they were, sailing together. It was just really nicely done.
Yeah.
So I could see her really being like the prophetess of the future. But
right. Well, she does get the last moment of the book. For sure.
Anyway, thank you.
Sure.
I liked the note section.
Good.
That was another question I had for you was, which is the ending? Where do you want people to stop? But I read the dissertation excerpt and I took it as, she's got a book forthcoming from this publisher. So you give us a little glimpse of what might happen, as life goes on. And I was cheering for her. And you answer a few other little questions that come up through those pieces. So I enjoyed that part.
That's great. I think it's a love it or hate it sort of thing. But I really liked, for me personally, well, what they really were outtakes from the rest of the book. But I like the, once a book ends, I feel this as a reader is like, the characters, it's like the sense of the characters go on, right? So I really wanted to just deliver a little sense of, life goes on. The characters are still existing, and look, she published her dissertation.
Right. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Are there any other questions? This is our chance to learn all about this. No other questions?
Those were wonderful questions, I have to say, you guys. I wish we could have done this live, right? Is that what we were planning on, or no? Maybe we were always on Zoom, but. And I know you have copies of the book at the library. Maybe you've already said this.
We have a copy that can be checked out, and we have copies available for sale. And Amity graciously signed some of our Hotchkiss Library book plates, which we received back yesterday. So you can get one and put it right in your book.
And I say you're selling them at cost. It's a good price, and it's a first edition. The book's gone into a second edition now.
Oh, so. Great. Excellent. Yeah. So I hope that you'll find time to be able to get to your next project again, and we'll give you a few years on that, and hopefully we'll have our book signing, and then you can come in person, which would be
wonderful. Love that.
So thank you so much for your amazing book and for this wonderful discussion, and thank you all for joining us this evening and for supporting our library. Again, just call us or email us if you'd like to get a copy of the book. And our next event is on August 14th, something completely different, a cookbook, the Berkshire's Farm Table Cookbook, learning about a lot of local farmers. So if you're interested, please let us know or go to our website to get more information. And thank you all so much, and stay well and keep reading.